Commander Park Hu-Yan-Woo stood at the observation deck of Earth's main space station, sipping his morning coffee when the emergency alarm started blaring. Through the thick reinforced glass, he could see something that made his blood run cold. An alien ship was approaching, but this wasn't like the sleek vessels he'd seen in diplomatic meetings before. This ship looked like it had been through hell itself. Massive holes punctured its silver hull, and what used to be graceful curves were now jagged tears in the metal. Black smoke poured from several sections, and the ship wobbled as it struggled to maintain course. Whatever had attacked this vessel possessed weapons that could tear through advanced alien technology like paper. The docking bay crew worked frantically to guide the damaged ship to safety. Hu-Yan-Woo had never seen them move so fast. Everyone could sense that something terrible was happening, something that went far beyond normal diplomatic visits or trade negotiations. When the airlock finally opened, Hu-Yan-Woo barely recognized the figure that stumbled out. Ambassador Kexthera of the Velthari had always appeared proud and regal during previous meetings. Her crystalline skin used to shimmer with inner light, and her movements were always precise and graceful. The Velthari considered themselves superior to younger species, like humanity. But now, Kexthera looked completely different. Her crystal skin had turned dull gray, and cracks ran across her face like spiderwebs. Her elegant robes were torn and stained with something that looked like liquid metal. She moved like someone who hadn't slept in weeks, stumbling and catching herself against the walls. "Commander Park," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your species. I know we have not always treated you with respect. We called you stellar infants, primitive newcomers to the galaxy." Her hand shook as she activated a small device. "But now, we need your help desperately. The Reapers have finally come for us." The holographic display that appeared made Hu-Yan-Woo's coffee cup slip from his hands. It shattered on the floor, but he didn't notice. The images showed entire solar systems that had been completely stripped bare. Planets that once supported billions of lives were now nothing but empty rocks floating in space. Even the stars themselves looked dimmer, as if something had been feeding on their energy. "This was the Kepler system last month," Kexthera continued, changing the display. "Home to 12 billion Velthari. Now look at it." The image shifted to show the same system, but now it was completely empty, except for floating debris. They took everything. Every ship, every station, every living being. Nothing remains except dust and metal scraps. Admiral Lee Jamin walked into the United Earth Assembly Hall with heavy steps. The massive chamber, which usually buzzed with political debates and trade discussions, had fallen completely silent. Representatives from every human colony, space station, and settlement were present, either in person or through holographic projection. The air felt thick with tension as everyone waited to hear about humanity's greatest threat. Behind Jamin, enormous screens displayed a terrifying map of the galaxy. Red zones marked where the Reapers had already struck, consuming entire civilizations. The red was spreading like a disease, moving closer and closer to human territory with each passing day. Yellow zones showed systems currently under attack, their desperate distress signals growing weaker by the hour. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jamin began, his voice echoing through the chamber. 3 months ago, the Velthari Empire controlled 300 star systems. They had the most advanced technology in the known galaxy, energy shields that could stop anything we could throw at them, and weapons that could crack planets in half. They looked down on us as primitive children playing with toys. He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "Today, they control exactly 12 systems. 12. Everything else has been consumed by the Reapers. At their current rate of advance, these mechanical monsters will reach the outer human colonies in exactly 18 months. Mars will fall in 2 years, and Earth itself will be under attack in less than 3 years. Defense Minister Kim So-young stood up from her seat in the front row. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Admiral, with all due respect, Our entire military fleet barely numbers 2,000 ships. Most of those are patrol vessels and cargo escorts, not warships, built for major combat. The Velthari had over 50,000 military vessels, including massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed our largest carriers. If they couldn't stop these Reapers, how can we possibly succeed? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Murmurs started spreading through the assembly as representatives began whispering to each other. Some shook their heads in despair, while others looked angry at being asked to face impossible odds. A few seemed ready to suggest immediate evacuation to the furthest reaches of space, but Admiral Jamin's voice cut through the growing panic like a sword. Minister Kim, you're absolutely right about our numbers. We are massively outgunned and outnumbered, but that's exactly why we must act now, while we still have any chance at all. The Reapers grow stronger with every system they consume. They learn from every enemy they defeat. If we wait, if we hide, and hope they'll somehow miss us, we'll only make them more powerful. He gestured to the displays showing Reaper technology. But here's what the Velthari didn't have: unpredictability. They fought with perfect formations, logical strategies, and calculated moves. The Reapers adapted to that. They can't adapt to something they can't understand, and humans have always specialized in doing the impossible. Captain Choi Minho had seen many changes in his 20 years of service, but nothing prepared him for what was happening at the Luna shipyards. The massive orbital construction facility that usually built peaceful cargo vessels and passenger transports had transformed into something completely different overnight. The sound of welding torches and heavy machinery filled the air 24 hours a day as thousands of workers raced against time. He watched in amazement as civilian ships received military upgrades at an impossible pace. Cargo haulers that once carried grain and manufactured goods were now being fitted with missile launchers and laser cannons. The workers welded thick armor plates onto passenger liners that used to ferry tourists between Earth and the outer colonies. Even more shocking, they were pulling ancient warships from the museum displays, vessels that had fought in humanity's first interstellar conflicts decades ago. "Sir, look at that." His aide pointed toward a ship that made Minho's jaw drop. The old battlecruiser Incheon Victory was being towed out of the military museum, its hull covered in rust and its engines silent for 30 years. Now, teams of engineers swarmed over it like ants, replacing outdated systems with modern equipment and patching holes that had been left as historical reminders of past battles. The transformation wasn't limited to Luna. Reports flooded in from every human settlement across the galaxy. Mining stations were converting their asteroid-breaking equipment into weapons. Agricultural colonies were turning their transport ships into makeshift troop carriers. Even luxury cruise ships were being stripped of their entertainment facilities and converted into mobile command centers. Meanwhile, on Mars, Colonel Naam Jihai faced an equally challenging task. The Red Planet's training facilities were overflowing with volunteers who had answered humanity's desperate call. These weren't professional soldiers or career military officers. They were ordinary people who had made an extraordinary choice to fight for their species' survival. She looked out at the sea of faces before her, former asteroid miners with hands scarred from years of hard labor, school teachers who had never held anything more dangerous than a pen, farmers from the agricultural colonies who knew more about growing crops than firing weapons. Some were barely 18 years old, fresh out of school, with their whole lives ahead of them. Others were grandparents who remembered the stories their own parents told about Earth's ancient wars. "Listen up." Jihai's voice boomed across the training ground. "I'm not going to lie to you. Under normal circumstances, it takes 6 months to train a basic soldier and 2 years to create a combat-ready Marine. We don't have that luxury. We have exactly 96 hours to turn you into fighters who can stand against an enemy that has conquered civilizations thousands of years older than ours." The combined human and Velthari fleet emerged from hyperspace, expecting a battle. But what they found was something far worse. Captain Park Sagan gripped his command chair as the horrific scene unfolded on the main view screen. The Kepler system, which had once been home to billions of living beings, had become a mechanical graveyard where nightmare machines worked with terrifying efficiency. Massive Reaper constructs floated in the void like geometric cities of death. Each one was easily the size of Earth's largest metropolitan areas, their dark metal surfaces covered in countless smaller machines that moved like metallic insects. These behemoths weren't fighting or conquering, they were methodically dismantling everything in the system with the cold precision of industrial equipment. Sajian watched in horror as one of the massive constructs approached what had once been a beautiful garden world. Millions of smaller harvester units poured from its hull like a swarm of locusts. They landed on the planet's surface and immediately began tearing apart everything they touched. Cities, forests, mountains, oceans, nothing was spared from their relentless appetite. The harvesters converted everything into raw materials that were then transported back to the massive motherships. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Beekman from the navigation station. "They're not just killing everyone, they're eating the entire planet." The Velthari ships moved forward in their traditional battle formation, an elegant diamond pattern that had served them well for thousands of years. Their energy weapons blazed to life, sending brilliant streams of plasma toward the nearest Reaper construct. The beams struck the enemy's hull with tremendous force, creating spectacular explosions that lit up the darkness of space. But when the light faded, the Reaper construct remained completely undamaged. The advanced Velthari weapons that could destroy asteroids and crack planetary shields had barely left scorch marks on the enemy's armor. Worse yet, the Reapers immediately responded with devastating precision. Their weapons weren't flashy or dramatic like the Velthari energy beams. Instead, they fired concentrated bursts of some unknown energy that cut through the alien ship's shields as if they didn't exist. Within minutes, the elegant Velthari formation was falling apart. Ships that had fought together for centuries found themselves helpless against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The Reapers calculated the exact trajectory of each Velthari vessel and fired their weapons at precisely the right moment to cause maximum damage. "Captain," shouted Communications Officer Lee Hyojin, "the Velthari flagship is requesting immediate assistance. They've lost main power, and their command crew is trapped." Sagian realized that traditional military tactics would get them all killed. The Reapers were like a computer virus that had learned to counter every conventional strategy. But humans had never been particularly conventional. "All human ships, break formation immediately," he ordered. "Execute attack pattern K." Deep inside the research bay of the human flagship, Engineer Kong Haijin hadn't slept for 3 days straight. Her eyes were bloodshot and her hands shook from too much coffee, but she couldn't stop working. Scattered around her workstation were pieces of twisted metal and strange crystalline components that her team had salvaged from a damaged Reaper unit during the last battle. The fragment they were studying was no bigger than a car engine, but it contained technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever built. Every component was perfectly designed, with no wasted materials or unnecessary parts. The metal alloys were stronger than anything in human databases, and the energy conduits could carry power loads that would melt human equipment instantly. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, Engineer Park Dong-wook, pointing at a complex circuit pattern. "Every single pathway is mathematically perfect. There's no redundancy, no backup systems, no room for error. These machines don't just follow logic, they are pure logic." As she continued examining the alien technology, a disturbing pattern emerged. The Reapers had encountered thousands of different species across the galaxy, and they had learned to counter every possible military strategy. Their databases contained detailed information about energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulses, and even exotic matter bombs. They had prepared for every logical form of attack. But then Hai-Jin noticed something interesting. The Reaper programming showed massive gaps when it came to dealing with actions that served no tactical purpose. The machines couldn't understand why anyone would waste resources on seemingly pointless maneuvers or sacrifice valuable equipment without gaining any strategic advantage. "That's it," she shouted, startling her exhausted team. "Their weakness isn't in their armor or weapons, it's in their thinking. They can't comprehend waste, sacrifice, or seemingly crazy behavior because it goes against their core programming for maximum efficiency." Her theory was about to be tested in the most dangerous way possible. 3 decks below, Marine Sergeant Yu Taeho was preparing for a mission that every military manual would classify as completely insane. Intelligence reports showed that a damaged Reaper harvester was floating near the outer edge of the battle zone, apparently cut off from the main fleet. The standard procedure would be to attack it with long-range missiles or energy weapons from a safe distance. Instead, Taeho had volunteered to board the enemy vessel, using nothing but magnetic clamps and shaped explosive charges equipment. That was literally hundreds of years old, compared to the advanced technology everyone else was using. "Sir, are you sure about this?" asked Corporal Kim Jae-wook, as he helped Taeho check his primitive boarding equipment. "We have plasma cutters and quantum disruptors available. Why are you using tools that belong in a museum?" Taeho grinned as he strapped the magnetic clamps to his combat suit. "Because sometimes the old ways are the best ways. These machines have probably seen every advanced weapon in the galaxy, but I bet they've never dealt with a crazy human using a hammer and some explosives." Dr. Lim Da-yoon had been staring at the same data streams for 18 hours straight, her coffee cup long since empty and forgotten. The quantum analysis lab hummed quietly around her as she studied the patterns of Reaper communication intercepts. What she discovered in those glowing data displays would change the entire course of the war. The breakthrough came when she noticed something strange happening during the recent battles. Whenever human ships attacked the Reapers using conventional military tactics, the enemy response was immediate and devastating. But when the humans did something unexpected or seemingly stupid, there was always a brief delay before the Reapers could react. "Computer, show me the timestamps for Reaper responses during the last engagement," she commanded. The holographic display filled with thousands of data points, each representing a split-second decision made by the machine collective. Most responses happened within milliseconds, but scattered throughout were delays that lasted several seconds, an eternity in space combat. She cross-referenced these delays with human tactical reports and found an incredible pattern. Every time the delay occurred, it was in response to human actions that made no logical sense from a military perspective. Ships flying directly into obvious traps, pilots making turns that wasted fuel and exposed their weaknesses, commanders ordering attacks that had no chance of success. "They're not broken or malfunctioning," she whispered to herself as the realization hit her. "They're thinking too hard." Da-yoon immediately called Admiral Lee Jamin to the lab. When he arrived, still wearing his battle-stained uniform from the command bridge, she was practically bouncing with excitement. "Admiral, I figured out why our crazy tactics are working," she said, pulling up the analysis on the main screen. "The Reaper collective consciousness is like a massive computer, trying to solve every problem perfectly. When we do something that follows standard military doctrine, they have pre-calculated responses ready instantly." She highlighted the delay patterns in bright red. "But when we do something completely insane, something that makes no tactical sense, their collective mind gets stuck. They're trying to calculate optimal responses to chaos, but human tactics don't follow optimal patterns. We're not trying to win efficiently, we're just trying to win, period." Jamin studied the data with growing amazement. "So you're saying that our biggest weakness, our tendency to make emotional, irrational decisions, is actually our greatest strength against these machines?" "Exactly," Da-yoon replied. "Every time Captain Park's agent ordered his ships to scatter randomly, or when Sergeant Uteho used primitive boarding tactics, or when our pilots made suicide runs that served no strategic purpose. The Reapers had to stop and recalculate. In those few seconds of confusion, we could actually hurt them. The next engagement would prove her theory beyond any doubt. Admiral Jamin gave orders that would have gotten any human commander court-martialed under normal circumstances. Wave after wave of human ships attacked from impossible angles, making decisions that defied every principle of military science. The war room fell silent as Admiral Lee Jamin laid out the most desperate plan in human military history. Captain Onsubin stood at attention, studying the holographic display that showed the heart of the Reaper fleet, a massive command nexus surrounded by thousands of enemy vessels. The structure was easily the size of Earth's moon, its dark surface covered in weapon systems that could vaporize entire battleships with a single shot. "Captain, I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Jamin said, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was asking. "The command nexus is protected by defense grids that have never been breached. Intelligence estimates show at least 5,000 Reaper ships guarding the approaches, plus automated weapon platforms that can track and destroy anything larger than a fighter craft." Subin nodded calmly, though everyone in the room could see the tension in her shoulders. She had volunteered for this mission, knowing full well it was essentially a death sentence. The hybrid ships they would be using were experimental vessels that combined human engineering with salvaged Reaper technology. The fusion of two completely different technological philosophies had created something powerful, but incredibly unstable. "Sir, what's our estimated survival probability?" asked Lieutenant Commander Oh Sung-min, one of the other volunteer pilots. Jamin hesitated before answering. "Honestly, less than 3%. The hybrid engines might explode during the approach. The Reaper components might turn against us mid-flight. And even if everything works perfectly, you'll be flying into the most heavily defended position in known space." The 12 pilots chosen for the mission exchanged glances. They were humanity's absolute best, veterans who had survived multiple battles against impossible odds, pilots whose reflexes and intuition had kept them alive when superior technology had failed. But this mission was different. This wasn't about surviving, or even winning a traditional victory. This was about buying time for the rest of humanity. Subin looked around at her fellow volunteers and saw the same grim determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. "Admiral, we understand the risks, but if we don't take out that command nexus, the Reapers will eventually adapt to all our chaos tactics. They're already learning from each battle, getting better at predicting our unpredictable moves." Engineer Kong Haijin stepped forward, her face pale from weeks of sleepless nights working on the hybrid technology. "Captain, I need to warn you about the ships one more time. The human navigation systems and Reaper power cores don't play well together. We've had 3 test flights end in complete system failures. The computers might give you false readings, the engines could shut down without warning, and the weapon systems are completely untested in combat." "In other words," Subin replied with a bitter smile, "they're perfect for confusing the Reapers, because we don't even know how they'll behave." The launch bay was eerily quiet as the 12 hybrid vessels prepared for departure. Each ship looked like a metallic nightmare, human hull designs twisted and modified to accommodate alien technology that pulsed with an unsettling energy. The emergency broadcast reached every human settlement across the galaxy simultaneously. Admiral Lee Jamin's voice crackled through communication systems on mining stations, agricultural colonies, research outposts, and passenger ships scattered across hundreds of star systems. His message was simple but carried the weight of humanity's entire future. "This is Admiral Jamin speaking to all human vessels and installations. Protocol Artemis is now active. I repeat, Protocol Artemis is now active. Every ship, every weapon, everything we have must converge on these coordinates immediately. This is not a drill. This is humanity's final stand. The response was unlike anything in recorded history. From the furthest reaches of human space, vessels that had never been designed for combat began their journey toward the ultimate battle. Ancient cargo freighters that had been hauling grain and manufactured goods for decades suddenly found themselves loaded with every explosive device their crews could find. Mining ships designed to crack asteroids turned their industrial equipment into improvised weapons. Lieutenant Commander Oh Min-young sat in her fighter's cockpit, watching through the transparent aluminum canopy as the most incredible sight in human history unfolded around her. Ships were arriving through hyperspace every few minutes, and each new arrival brought vessels that had no business being in a war zone. A hospital ship from the Centauri medical colony dropped out of hyperspace nearby, but it looked completely different from its original peaceful purpose. The crew had ripped out all the medical equipment and surgical bays, replacing them with fusion bombs that could level entire city blocks. The ship's captain, Dr. Kim Yansu, had painted a message on the hull. First, do no harm to innocent people. An elderly cargo captain named Park Jinwoo piloted a freighter that was literally older than some of the planets in human space. His ship had been carrying farming equipment to the outer colonies when the call came. Now, his cargo bay was filled with chemical explosives donated by mining crews, and his ancient engines strained to keep up with the faster military vessels. Even more shocking, the massive orbital defense platforms that protected Earth itself were moving. These enormous structures, each the size of a small city, had detached from their positions around humanity's home world. They moved slowly through space like metal mountains, their massive bulk aimed directly at the Reaper fleet. Control? This is Lieutenant Commander Oh Min-young, she radioed to the command ship. I'm seeing civilian vessels arriving from sectors I didn't even know had human settlements. How many ships are we talking about? The response from communications officer Lee Hyojin made her heart race. Min-young, current count is over 15,000 vessels and climbing. We've got everything from luxury cruise ships to garbage scows. Even the museum orbital stations are moving to join us. What amazed Oh Min-young most was seeing merchant captains who had spent their entire careers avoiding conflict now flying in formation with decorated military veterans. Teachers from colony schools sat next to battle-hardened Marines, and farmers who had never left their home. Systems found themselves preparing for the greatest battle in galactic history. The turning point came during the 12th hour of what would later be known as the Battle of Last Hope. Admiral Lee Jamin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing amazement as something unprecedented began to happen. The red dots representing Reaper forces, which had been steadily advancing for months across the galaxy, suddenly stopped moving forward. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Reapers were retreating. The mechanical collective that had consumed entire civilizations without pause for thousands of years was actually pulling back from the battle. Their massive command ships, which had seemed invincible just hours before, were now fleeing toward the darkness between star systems. The smaller harvester units that had been systematically dismantling everything in their path were abandoning their work and racing to catch up with the retreating fleet. Lieutenant Commander Oh Min-young's voice crackled over the communication system from her damaged fighter. Admiral, I'm seeing something incredible out here. The Reapers aren't just retreating, they're running. Their formations are completely broken, and they're abandoning equipment and wounded units. I've never seen anything like it. What had broken the seemingly unstoppable enemy wasn't superior technology or brilliant military strategy. It was something the Reapers had never encountered in all their conquests across the galaxy, an entire species willing to sacrifice everything for people they barely knew. The collective machine intelligence simply couldn't process the concept of such massive, seemingly wasteful expenditure of resources for no logical gain. Ambassador Kexthara stood beside Admiral Jamin on the bridge, her crystalline features still bearing the scars from her desperate flight to Earth months ago. But now, Those same features glowed with renewed hope as she watched the enemy that had nearly destroyed her people fleeing into the void of deep space. "Admiral Jamin," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion that surprised even herself. "Your species fought for us as if we were your own children. You risked everything, your entire civilization, your homeworld, your future, to save people who had dismissed you as primitive newcomers to the galaxy." Jamin turned to look at her, his uniform torn and stained from the long battle, exhaustion clear in his eyes. But his voice was steady and calm when he replied, "Ambassador, that's simply what neighbors do. When someone needs help, you help them. It doesn't matter if they're family or strangers, if they've been kind to you or not. Some things are just the right thing to do." The aftermath of the battle brought changes that rippled across the entire galaxy. News of humanity's victory spread faster than hyperspace travel, carried by survivors from dozens of different species who had witnessed the impossible. The young human civilization that had been ignored or looked down upon by older galactic powers suddenly found themselves receiving visitors from across known space. The proud Zertani Empire, which had refused all contact with humans for over a century, sent their most senior diplomats to Earth with offers of friendship and alliance. The ancient Kethmori Confederation, whose scientists had dismissed human technology as crude and ineffective, now begged for cultural and scientific exchange programs.